Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to be talking about the absolute demolition of the North Side team and the ramping up and preparing for a World Series on the South Side. And we have training camp starting and all kinds of other stuff. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. Sure, the season's not going on right now, but that shouldn't stop you from heading on over to icehogs.com, getting a hat, shirt, jersey, signing up for season tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, I am sure this week has been an absolute roller coaster for you because I know it has been for me, and I just need to step into the mind of Alex and see what's going on.
Well, it really is a roller coaster. I mean, for something that we knew that was coming, I didn't think it would hit me as much as it did, but it did. And I mean, look, I've sat here and advocated for a rebuild on the North Side for some time now. It just wasn't working anymore. And the core itself isn't all to blame. There is so much to go around. But either way, I supported the idea of a significant rebuild. And this is what this is. But when it actually happened, the night after the game against the Reds at home, when Bryant and Rizzo were seen at the dugout, not getting at bats, and the game ends, and Chris Bryant is just kind of taking it all in, sitting on the bench, it started to hit me emotionally. And then the next thing we knew, Rizzo is off to the Yankees, and they are showing him and his family walking around Wrigley Field, soaking it in for one more time, and then leaving the ballpark with everybody cheering him out on the street when he's heading to the players' parking lot. And then the next day happens, and within, an hour, both Baez and Bryant were gone, and Kimbrel was gone. I mean, it just, I sat there soaking it all in, thinking about what we had gone through with this team, for better and for worse, remembering where I was when this team was assembled, where I was when this team took its first step, where I was when this team started making the postseason and even winning in the postseason, and the exact moment where I was when they won it all in 2016. And that ride we had, that magical, magical ride we had in 2016, the magical ride we had in 2015, and even in 2017, when you were still able to make it back to the NLCS despite spending the first half hungover. Heck, even before the collapse of September 2018, you had a lot of memorable moments over 2015 and 2018. And then last year, it was kind of a BS season, but you won a division title. It showed you last year what you could do with that team and both what its limitations were. It hit me, and I was like, wow, this actually did happen. These guys are gone. It's a new era. It was like, wow. You almost couldn't put it into words, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw somebody tweet, and I'm going to butcher it because I didn't save the tweet because I'm not smart like that. But it was something like, I've never been so devastated by news that I knew was coming that I fully agree with before.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what it was. We knew that there were going to be big shakeups. We knew that these guys were going to get traded. We knew that it was the right thing to do. even though I will say we shouldn't have been in this position, but unfortunately we were, and you had to do what you had to do with the position you were in. If that makes sense, right?
Yes. And I'm going to say that if we do things right, that this won't be the first or the last time we do where we start shedding things like this. Because, I mean, honestly, what, you look at what the Red Sox have done, and every few years when it's not working anymore, they shed a bunch of money and they bring up the new crop of players, sign a few free agents, and they reset. The Red Sox got rid of Mookie Betts, one of the best players in baseball, and are, one of the favorites to go to the World Series.
And imagine if I don't know what the timetable for Chris Sale is, but what if you get him back and he's dominating again? Imagine that.
Yeah. That's kind of what we can expect. I mean, this was the bad case scenario of unloading all the players, is where they were underperforming and you weren't in contention. But if they do this right, the next crop of players and free agents hopefully has a longer contention window. And then before you get into a situation that you're crippled, you shed players, shed money. And it's kind of like when you have a controlled fire in a field and then everything blooms better afterwards because you're hitting a reset button on it without a full rebuild. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't understand the difference between a full rebuild and what the Cubs just did. And I'm going to explain it to you. With what the Cubs did, next year we probably will not compete.
No.
But I look for them to probably start competing the year after. A full rebuild, we're looking at 3 to 5 years of not competing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. And if you look at the top prospects the Cubs have, you look at the revised list, this is according to MLB.com. You look at some of these key guys they have. Braylon Marquez, who would have been here by now had he not had a shoulder injury. You're looking at Brennan Davis probably next year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not until next year. Maybe you see him in September, but I think it's realistic to expect next year, which is okay.
I think they'll call him up in September. What harm is that going to do?
Well, I just, if they do, fine. I just feel like if you call him up in September, I think my advice to people is temper your expectations a little bit, because he's doing great right now. He's shooting up there in prospect rankings, but I just feel like for the first go around, I would temper expectations. I would tell people, kid's still very young. He's just shooting up through the system now. I would not see, I could see him struggling out of the gate a little bit if he's called up this year. But if the Cubs feel like it's good experience, a good playing time, then fine, I'm all for it. I mean, and you might see Miguel Amaya either late this year or early next year. You look at some of the guys they got in some of the trades. We're looking next year, the year after. So Alexander Canario, Alexander Vizcaino, those are two guys key guys they got. You're looking at 2022, 2023, Cole Franklin, 2023. Maybe see Christopher Morel next year. Guys like Pete Crowe, Armstrong, and Christian Hernandez, who have a lot of potential. It's probably going to be a few years for them. Now, you can look at this two ways. You can look at it and say, well, a lot of these prospects maybe a bit time off while some are close. So how fast is this really going to take? But I do want to emphasize the fact that it's probably a good thing that you have a wide range of prospect projections, because I think what Jed Hoyer is really trying to do is make sure that not only are they going to try to grow the next core, so to speak, through the farm system, he wants to ensure that they have a strong farm system consistently and not bring
Like the
everybody up.
Dodgers.
Right, exactly. They just traded for Max Scherzer, for fuck's sake. I mean, they're able to pull off blockbusters every year. This year was Scherzer. Last year was Mookie Betts. The year before that was Manny Machado, and then Yu Darvish before that. That's what the Cubs would ideally like to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the crazy part is, if you think about, the Cubs have how many years been talking about when we have our own network.
Mm-hmm.
When we have our own network. And can you think of an absolute worse start to having their own network than they've had so far?
A pandemic shortened season and a rebuild season.
Wait. It is up until the 11th hour before the first season. The major cable provider didn't carry it. A pandemic shortened season. You had the team being bad for both years of the network, and you sold off every one of your star players.
You know what I think would be a good plan for them? I think, one thing that they've done a nice job is clearing time to show minor league games through the Cubs system. I think now more than ever, when you're not broadcasting a Cub game or you're not doing some of the Bears stuff that you're doing, if you have more slot times to broadcast minor league Cubs baseball from multiple levels, I think that would be a great opportunity for the Marquee Network to get some viewers, because people will want to watch the prospects.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many young players, and it's going to take a while to sort of shake out exactly where they rank in the system. Is we sort of shuffle them on paper, but to actually see what these guys have and get them with our coaching staff and honestly, because there's so many holes open now, there's a lot of room for young players to come up and step up and see what they can do.
So out of the top 11 prospects for the Cubs right now, 10 of them are 22 or younger. So right now they're in low A, high A, double A, rookie ball. So they're going to be coming up through the system over the next few years. So, we're going to be back. I remember the days very well in 2012, 2013, 2014, where we were following the farm very closely. And you know what? There is something that is kind of fun and exciting about following the farm. It's just, you'd rather be contending for a championship. Now, looking at what we have right now, I could definitely say there's some hope and some promise in these prospects we have. But here is my concern, and I'll see what you think about this concern as well.
Is I have a concern. Well, I don't know if it's a concern. It's a question that may or may not have an answer. So you ask first.
Okay, so my concern is, comparing this to the first rebuild, I see potential, but in that first rebuild, the top potential was superstar caliber potential. I don't know if there is superstar potential in here. Maybe there is, and maybe one of these guys develop. It's completely possible. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but when we rebuilt with Theo Epstein, Chris Bryant was projected to be a bona fide superstar before he was drafted. He was the biggest prospect in the draft, and thank God the Astros took Mark Appel over him. When Kyle Schwarber was drafted, he had superstar potential. When they traded for Anthony Rizzo, what he did in the minors, people were kind of talking superstar potential with him. Javier Baez, superstar potential with him. Maybe it's just too early, and maybe a few of these guys will show that. Is it there yet? Am I ready to look and say the future is really bright with what we have? I think there's definitely hope to develop some good talent here. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of these guys that are still way down there that could develop into that superstar potential. But I just felt like with the Theo rebuild, when we drafted and acquired guys, we were getting guys who were already being labeled as potential superstars. I don't know how you feel about that. And I don't know if your question is similar, but
No, my question's a little more mechanical, I guess.
okay.
But honestly, I see Brennan Davis and Ed Howard as superstar potential. And
I hope Brennan Davis is. I like him a lot.
Those are the two guys that I'm the most hopeful for. And neither, they're ranked 2 and 5 in the farm system. So we're going to see more of Braylon Marquez. We'll finally see what a Miguel Amaya is. Christian Hernandez, we're not going to see for a few years.
That's going to be a while, but there is superstar potential there. It's just going to be a very long time.
We'll see what we have with Crowe Armstrong.
There's a lot of things to like about that guy. So,
I mean, the reason we got him is because of injury.
Right. But if he's healthy,
if he was healthy, they would not have included him. That trade would have not happened.
Mm-hmm.
They're very high on him at the Mets. And with the shoulder injury, then it added a level of risk where they made it so they would trade.
Mm-hmm. And it could be a huge payoff for the Cubs. Huge.
Absolutely. But the question I have is we traded with the White Sox and we got Nick Madrigal.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Nico Horner.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to guess they move Nico to shortstop for next year.
That's my guess. Yes.
But then Chase Trump is going to be coming up sooner rather than later, maybe next year. Then what do they do?
Well, let's see. I'm looking at, Chase Strumpf right now is struggling in the minors. Granted, it's hard to judge some of these guys when they're coming off a season where they didn't play, but I feel like with Nick Madrigal, you're getting a guy who has a much higher ceiling. So I think when they had the opportunity to get that, they pounced on it. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on the Madrigal Kimbrel trade, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit, but I feel like they see Nick Madrigal as a more established guy. I mean, obviously he's played in the majors. So, maybe this is just a matter of we have an opportunity to fill in something a lot better. And maybe Chase Strumpf ends up being trade bait.
I mean, that's a possibility. And, you look at Nick Madrigal and we can analyze these trades if you want, but I want to start with that. I guess the Craig Kimbrel dealt to the Chicago White Sox for Nick Madrigal and Cody Hoyer.
Mm-hmm.
And what's hilarious is I look at this as a win-win for both teams. And I saw somebody made a cartoon where it had Cubs fans and Sox fans, and they were both screaming, "We got fleeced."
Well, it's funny because my emotions are riding high during those last few hours. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. When this trade went down, I thought we got absolutely fleeced. I thought that's it for the best reliever in baseball right now. And I texted my Sox fan friend. I said, "You just robbed us again. Rick Hahn just bent us over again." And I talked to a few other White Sox people. And as I was raging, they all, they were texting me back saying, "Oh, wow, I like Craig Kimbrel, but wow, we had to give you guys Nick Madrigal." Like, they were disappointed that they were giving up Nick Madrigal. And the more I looked at Nick Madrigal, the more tape I watched, because I went home, I watched the footage, I looked at the stats, the advanced ones. I even wrote about it for Cubby's Crib later. And I started to grow on the idea. And I thought maybe this is good for the Cubs. Obviously, it's great for the White Sox. The White Sox are getting that benefit right away. The White Sox might have just won the pennant with that move. But for the Cubs in the long run, it fills a need. And I think from a White Sox perspective, you could say, yeah, he was an interesting asset, but he probably fits what the Cubs are trying to do more, while Kimbrel tries to fit what they're doing more. So I admit I was pissed when that first happened, but then I kind of calmed down and warmed up to it a little bit.
The trade that would have made this even better for the White Sox is had they gone after Frazier from the Pirates. And because he has next year under his belt too, you'd have another year. And my friend Gary was like, well, they weren't going to make that trade because they have Nick Madrigal and they don't want to pay 2 second basemen.
Mm-hmm.
But you make this trade then, and suddenly you're like, all right, we replace Nick Madrigal with Frazier and you get Craig Kimbrel. That's a huge win for the White Sox. But, you know, for the White Sox, you get Kimbrel, and as it stands right now in 2021, it's a big bump up from Cody Hoyer. Big bump up.
It is.
Nick Madrigal is not going to play for you anymore this season anyway because of his injury.
Mm-hmm.
So for the White Sox this year, this is a huge, huge plus. For the Cubs, you have to look at it as, what does Craig Kimbrel do for you this year? What does a 30-something-year-old closer do for a team that's going to finish second to last in the division?
And right now, nothing.
So you get the best possible. Is Nick Madrigal is going to be, he is the guy that you've been missing all along, which is a high contact guy that makes contact.
His contact rate is fantastic.
Yes. He could be the leadoff guy that you have missed since Fowler left.
Sure. Speed, contact. He's not a walk machine, but if his pitch identification is as good as it is, and it seems like it is because he's able to make contact, maybe you can try to coach him to squeeze a few walks out of him. He's never going to be a high walk guy, but if he's hitting for a high average and draws a walk every now and then you got to say, well, the on base should be pretty good then. And, you know, the other thing too about Nick Madrigal is you get a guy that can speed around the bases. I mean, the Cubs have been kind of big and clunky. We have seen over the past few years, especially this year, when they try to make base running happen and they just fall flat on their face. Having a guy like Nick Madrigal, that can help you a lot. And now, if the middle of your infield looks like Nico Horner and Nick Madrigal, here are the positives. Athletic, speedy, high contact. That's all good. Here are the negatives. History of injuries for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting practically no power.
And you're stepping down in your fielding.
Yes, you are. Hopefully Nick Madrigal can kind of figure it out with the glove, because when he came up with the White Sox, if I remember correctly, he was hailed as a pretty good fielder.
Yeah. You know, the White Sox as a whole haven't been good fielding team in the last several years.
No.
And I think so, to some degree that's organizational, because there's been years where the Cubs have slipped in their fielding with the same group of guys, made a focus on it in the offseason and spring training, and then came right back. And I know part of it is just having elite level defenders, but some of it is you work on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you remember how good they were from 2015 through 2018, and then 2019, they took a massive, massive dip. And then the 2020 season, the Cubs defense was spectacular. They worked on it. They focused on it.
So this Kimbrel trade, I think it's a plus for both teams. And that's kind of what you look for in a good trade is both sides are going to walk away thinking that they gave up a lot, but they got a lot. And I think that's true for both teams. For the Cubs, Cody Hoyer, and I hadn't seen a lot of Cody Hoyer, and the numbers aren't great, but I listened to Steve Stone talk about him, and not in a Cubs perspective, talking about from a White Sox perspective, he's going to be very good, and he's going to end up being the closer for the Cubs for many years.
Well, he's got the stuff, and he's still pretty young. The other thing that's worth noting is that this year with the White Sox, Cody Hoyer, the ERA wasn't good, obviously, 5.12, and the whip was like 1.4, but the strikeouts per nine was 9.1, the walks per nine was 2.3. What really catches my attention is the fielding independent pitching. Despite the ERA being 5.12, the FIP was 3.67, which is much better than a 5+ ERA. So I think that, maybe with a little coaching, a little tweaking, Cody Hoyer can be a valuable piece for this team going forward. I mean, really, the centerpiece is Nick Madrigal. But if Cody Hoyer can be something too, that would be nice. But again, if you look at it from a Sox perspective, would you rather have Cody Hoyer or the best reliever in the game when you're in a pennant race?
And that's
easy.
the key. The key for it's easy. It's because both teams are in two different places. So Kimbrel for the White Sox makes much more sense, and giving up Madrigal and Hoyer. And if Madrigal ends up being the second baseman for the Cubs for several years, and Hoyer ends up being the closer, then you have to look at this as an absolute win. And, people can question as from a Cubs perspective, oh, we got fleeced, but you got two major league players for Craig Kimbrel.
Which is a good point, because most of the trades that we've made were prospects, not a lot of major league ready talent.
I feel prospects several years away. Prospects.
Right. And I feel like Jed Hoyer said, you know what, we need to make a deal that brings us MLB ready talent. I think he really needed to add a position or two where they could do that. And I mean, not only are you trading for Nick Madrigal, you're trading for a guy who has many years of control.
Yeah. So I like this trade as much as I didn't like Craig Kimbrel leaving. The return, I think this was a good, a pretty good trade.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel much better about it. I mean, that first hour or so when that trade went down, I was pissed. I was really, really pissed. It was probably me being overly emotional and looking at all the negatives, but, I've warmed up to it. And, like I said, my main concerns are Madrigal has an injury history already, and your middle of the diamond has very little power. But what the Cubs are going to have to do is they're going to have to look at their corner outfielders and their corner infielders. And if you plan to build around Wilson Contreras at catcher, you say, all right, well, you're going to have to build some power in the corner outfield and infield, because your projected future center fielder and Pete Crowe Armstrong, he's got a lot of great tools, but he's not a power hitter.
No,
and
he's a speed guy. He's a good defender. He's a good hitter. He's just not a power guy,
which is okay. But you're going to need your other outfielders to have power. You need to have power.
It's funny. They're building this team a lot like teams were built when I was a kid.
And you know what? Maybe, just maybe, Jed Hoyer is sensing something and he's trying to get ahead of the curve. Maybe teams are going to want to try to go to that philosophy again. Look what's happened in baseball the past year. Batting average is plummeting. Strikeouts are skyrocketing. And, maybe it comes to a point where teams are saying, you know what? We can't have this many holes in these swings, even if they're still producing, a similar amount of runs and more home runs than ever. Maybe we want to try to build more contact. And just maybe Jed Hoyer's trying to get ahead of the curve here, if I look at it from a positive perspective.
Yeah, it is kind of the way teams were built when I was a kid. Is your third baseman was a big power guy. Your first baseman was a big power guy. Your shortstop and your second baseman were light hitting. Mm-hmm. Your center fielder was a good defender. And your corner outfielders were big power guys.
Yeah.
And your catcher was an easy out. if you can build on that formula a bit. But that's the light hitting middle infielders are good average guys. And so you're going to have your contact guys, and maybe Madrigal isn't your long-term leadoff man. Maybe he's your number two.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a better place for him.
Probably just because he doesn't walk that much.
Right.
Even if his OBP is pretty good, he doesn't walk that much.
So, but he might be a short-term leadoff guy until you find that guy that's, got a good average and a high OBP.
So here are a few stats I wrote about in my Cubbies Crib article about Nick Madrigal. And this is, there's some pretty impressive stuff in here. His career contact rate in the majors total is 92%. And on pitches outside of the zone. So when he's swinging at pitches outside the strike zone, he's made contact 83.8%. That's impressive.
That is higher than Javi Baez's contact rate inside and outside combined.
Yeah, it really is. And I also looked at the splits. 0-2 counts, he's hitting 483.
Yeah, Nicky two strikes.
Yeah. Another thing too to look at is he's not just pulling the ball. His center, going to center, and this is according to Fangraphs, batted ball, 43.2%, and he goes oppo, 35%. So he could spray it all around. And we've seen Nico Horner do a great job of going foul line to foul line. He can pull a double or he can go the opposite way with a double down each line. So having guys that can make contact and spray it around.
Why that's important is the Cubs have become, I think I read a stat that the Cubs opponents use the shift against the Cubs more than any other team in baseball.
That does not surprise me at all because every single freaking game I watched with that core over the past few years, it seemed like nobody hit the ball hard right at somebody more than the Cubs did. They became so predictable.
It's because they're all pull hitters.
And
Bryant, when he's at his best, is going to all fields.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else is but when he's not, he's a pull hitter. Everybody else is a pull hitter. Jason Hayward. Oh yeah, Rizzo is a dead pull hitter. And Hayward's a big pull hitter too, but when Hayward is playing well, it's because he's hitting it to opposite field.
Yep.
And when he's not hitting the opposite field, he's playing like shit. And that's been the Cubs organization. So to have your second baseman and shortstop next year be able to put the ball in any field, it stops the shift and you force the other team to defend you properly.
I think that despite the sadness of all this, I think it's kind of exciting if you're going to look at this from a positive perspective, because when I look at this rebuild, I'm very cautious about how optimistic I am because I do have some skepticism and some doubts just naturally as a fan. But if there is a point of optimism I have with all this, is that they are truly trying to change their philosophy. And I give Jed Hoyer a lot of credit because one of my concerns was that they were going to just keep riding with what they had and not change their philosophy or replace guys that are almost dead similar and keep the same philosophy. It looks like Jed Hoyer is trying to do the opposite. And I feel like if you look at the players they've acquired on the pitching side and the hitting side, it's instead of power hitters that pull with big holes in their strings and crafty pitchers, you're seeing more contact guys and more high velocity guys on the pitching side.
Right. The next trade I guess we'll talk about, because it's what's on my list, is the Cubs sent Trevor Williams and Javi Baez to the Mets for Pete Crowe Armstrong, who's a center fielder. And so who is Pete Crowe Armstrong and how is he worth Javi Baez plus Trevor Williams? And Trevor Williams is honestly Javi Baez they're getting for 2 months. And then they're going to have to pay him. So you get a 2-month rental. Trevor Williams is a throw-in that was not a long-term piece for you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not have traded Pete Crowe Armstrong to you had he not have a non-throwing shoulder injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he was there the year before, he was their 19th overall pick. And he comes out of Harvard Westlake High School, which is, a major league factory. It's where Lucas Giolito went.
That's right. Yeah.
I think it was a bunch of guys that went there. Jack Flaherty, Lucas Giolito, Max Fried.
And these aren't just any ball players. These are all-star caliber ones.
Yeah. He's a plus hitter. His power is not that good, but his speed he's a fast plus speed guy. Good arm, a fantastic defender. So he's got, he's a good bat. There's some concerns that some strikeouts, holes in the swing have popped up, but he's young. He's a young guy.
He's 19.
Yeah. He's very young, but the bat, as good as his defense is, which, his defense it's not elite. It's noted as on the scale of the 80s scale. He's a 70 defense, which is well above average.
That's still pretty dang good. Yeah.
It's very good. For a high school guy that just came out of high school. Yeah, that's very good. He's going to only get better. He's a guy that typically has hard contact. He's not a power guy, but he has hard contact. Think Jason Hayward when he's being good.
So when he was a Brave and a Cardinal.
Not the Brave. Think Cardinals, Jason Hayward.
Yeah.
Because Atlanta Jason Hayward had more power.
Yeah, that's very true.
He's a hard contact guy. He's going to make, loud singles, doubles, which I'm fine with. He's a good contact guy. So I'm okay with that. He's a guy that was the 19th overall pick in a draft where most teams were going heavy for college players, and he came out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, from what I've read, the Mets were very, very high on this kid when they took him.
Yes. And the fact that they're going all in this year, and Crowe Armstrong, having a shoulder injury just adds enough of a question mark, and sweetening it with Trevor Williams. It finally was like, okay, we're doing this. And, for the Mets, this is their window to compete, and they'll worry about losing out on Pete Crowe Armstrong later on. This could very well be their Gleyber Torres trade.
Sure. It could be. It could be.
So again, I love Javi Baez, but I think getting this, Pete Crowe Armstrong is better than any compensatory pick you would get.
Of course.
Because I heard that the Cubs wouldn't have got a first round compensatory pick because their big market and their salary, they would have gotten a second round compensatory pick. So
more risk with that.
Much more risk. This is a guy at a top half of the first round, as opposed to a guy in the 70s or 80s.
Right.
So yeah, much more polished. So I'm okay with it.
I'm okay too, especially for Baez, who, well, his RBI and home runs looked really good. A lot of the other things, the strikeout rate, the contact rate, the plate discipline this year has been pretty damn bad.
Yep. You moved Jake Marisnick. You traded him to the Padres for Anderson Espinoza. So I don't know a lot about Anderson Espinoza. They got him from the Red Sox, so he wasn't from their system.
My understanding is, based on what people have said, they were actually surprised they got what they did for Jake Marisnick. So take that as you will.
So it looks like he signed out of as an international signing out of Venezuela when he was 16 years old with a $1.8 million signing bonus. So that's big money for a 16-year-old.
Yes, that is.
So he's a starting pitcher. So
stock up on arms.
Pretty much. They traded, they got him for Drew Pomeranz from the Red Sox. So that's, you got a guy who's a high ceiling guy, young. Chris Bryant got moved to the Giants for Alexander Canario and Caleb Killian.
This trade I was a little disappointed in.
Out of all of the trades, this one is by far and away the one I was the most disappointed in. Because other guys have a lot of upside. Pico Armstrong, big upside. Anderson Espinoza, that's a big flyer on a guy.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the initial report, which ended up being fake, is that Joey Bart was coming to the Cubs, and that would have been huge.
That would have been huge, but there was no way the Giants were doing that.
No, I was like, wow, we got Joey Bart, and it's like, no, it's like, I understand not getting Bart, but I feel like they got a little shorthanded on this one.
And you know what? It came down to, I think at the end, they just didn't get the offers. Trevor Story wasn't getting the offers.
Right.
And I think it was funny. I forget who was. I was listening to the radio and they had a national baseball guy right. I think it was like 15 minutes before the deadline. Right before, it was a few minutes before they made the announcement of the trade. And they were like, is Bryant going to go? And he's like, I would imagine so. And he's like, probably finalizing a few things, but trying to get somebody up the bid. But he's like, I anticipate that at the last minute, they'll probably make a trade with the Giants because of the Giants general manager, familiarity and friendship with Jed Hoyer. And probably that's going to be the direction they go because they know and trust each other.
Yeah. And I think Bryant's a nice fit there.
Yeah. The Chris Bryant trade, a little lackluster for me.
I agree. And if you look at the Anthony Rizzo trade, I thought they did really well with the Anthony Rizzo trade. And, it's kind of surprising how I think that they did better with an older, not quite as good Anthony Rizzo than they did Chris Bryant.
I think part of that was the Yankees absolutely needed the Cubs to pick up the rest of Rizzo's salary to avoid the luxury tax.
Which is probably true. And you know what? The Yankees, with all those resources, they got a lot of notable prospects.
Right. So with that is, I think they paid extra to make sure that the Cubs would pick up that money.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. Yeah. I keep forgetting that, the luxury tax doesn't seem to really care by the Dodgers, but yeah, looking at the Yankees payroll, because they've made plenty of moves. They went for Joey Gallo. Obviously the Yankees always have a massive payroll, but you add Joey Gallo into the mix and then you try to get Anthony Rizzo, that's a lot more you're adding both on the field and on the payroll. So Yeah, no, you're probably right on that.
And the thing is, it's not like, oh, you go over the luxury tax and you just pay some money. There's like increasing money based on the number of consecutive years you do it. Plus you start losing, international money,
which is bigger than now than
Yes.
ever, is that international slot money.
So yeah, it comes down to they don't want to go over that threshold. I mean, the Yankees have no issue going over the threshold. They just don't want to go over when they don't have to.
Right.
So it's, but yeah, the Giants trade, it just, the two guys they got weren't that high on the list of,
No.
the Canario is an outfielder and Caleb Killian is a pitcher. We'll keep an eye on and see where that goes.
Yeah, Canario's currently listed as 7, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. We already talked about Kimbrel. Ryan Tepera traded to the White Sox for Bailey Horn.
That's just kind of a whatever trade.
Yeah, that's just a whatever. So I don't care. Bailey Horn's he was a 2020 draft pick, and in high A, he's averaging 11 strikeouts per 9, or roughly. So he's a strikeout guy.
Hey, if he could be something, I'll take it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you traded a middle reliever for a future middle reliever.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much how it goes.
With Rizzo, you got Alexander Vizcaino and Kevin Alcontra. I would probably grade this trade a B+. Vizcaino is a pitcher. He's got a plus fastball and a plus change. And Alcantara is a 19-year-old outfielder who's got a high ceiling. So that's a good payoff for 2 months of a guy that wants a big contract.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very intrigued by Kevin Alcontra. The sample size is very small this year, only 9 games, but he's got a 455 OBP and a 357 average so far. He's played 1 game with the Cubs. He already looks like he's got a walk and a hit and 2 runs scored. So, hopefully he could keep continuing his hot ways through the rest of the year and just kind of keep working his way up. And that really goes for all these prospects. I mean, there's not much left in the minor league season. So, you just want them to finish strong, and then next year they keep looking to grow.
Yeah. Jock Peterson, we talked about this one when it happened. We got Bryce Ball. And for a guy that was absolutely not in your plans going forward, you got a boomer bust pick. Bryce Ball is either going to be really good or he's just going to fizzle out. Either way, you got the money off your books.
Yeah. And I mean, Jock Peterson was like the streakiest player ever. So it's kind of the epitome of what you can get from Bryce Ball, all or nothing.
And then the last trade is Andrew Chafin went to Oakland for Greg Deichmann and
that was a good trade, I thought.
And Daniel Palencio. That was a good one because Deichmann is probably going to be on the roster next year.
We might. I mean, I think maybe we could see him this year. It's possible.
That's a possibility. So this one seemed like so Daniel Palencio seems like he's a wild card. He's a first baseman, third baseman, right fielder. So he's one of those guys that can play multiple positions for bad fielders. But he seems like more of a toss in because they're like, well, that's not enough. But Deichmann seems like he's legit. Currently batting like 300, 433. His slash line is 300, 433, 452, 885 OPS.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So
That is pretty good.
So if he pans out and Brennan Davis pans out, suddenly your outfield is rebuilt.
Yeah. Yeah, you hope. And, people say, oh, why is he so old and he's still a prospect? Again, remember, COVID-19 season last year.
Yeah. Trying to say, he's 26. He's not that old. He's 26 and he's probably going to play. He's probably going to play at some point for the Cubs this year.
Yeah, I mean it's a little old for a prospect, but it's not like he's Patrick Wisdom or Yermin Mercedes.
Right. Yeah, I mean there's those couple of years between those two, those three players is astronomical. So you probably see him this year, and then he becomes a full-time guy next year.
Yeah.
So then that begs the question then, what does this roster look like next year? Because I'm going to go on the assumption that they're not going to pick up the $10 million option on Jake Arrieta.
No. God, no. No.
I'm fairly certain of that. So at that point, is barring arbitration, guys, you're not paying anybody. So you're looking at their roster. Jason Hayward's going to be making $24.5 million.
Ugh.
Kyle Hendricks will be making 14.
That's fine.
I'm guessing Wilson Contreras is probably going to be making the $8 million range after arbitration.
Yeah, so 8 to 10, somewhere around there.
I mean, he made like what, 6 something this year. So I'm guessing in the
10 might be a little high, maybe between 7 and 8.
Yeah, I'm going to guess around 8 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably pay him to not go to arbitration.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess 8 and a half.
I mean, people were asking me, some of my friends were asking me, we were having a little discussion last night, what the future of Willson Contreras holds. I know some people believe that the Cubs might try to trade him the offseason. I personally, and we'll see what happens. I kind of feel like Jed Hoyer might see Willson Contreras as like the centerpiece of all this.
That's a possibility. And there was a couple of quotes from Jed Hoyer that, got my head spinning a little bit. And one is that he made offers that he said the future will prove that they were very good offers for all of the key players.
Mm-hmm.
So he made offers, though they just weren't accepted. So they moved on and got what they could, which, very well, they could make those same offers in the offseason and they could, end up being good.
Sure.
So, I mean, who's to say that you don't get, Javi Baez probably not coming back. Rizzo, who knows? Bryant, probably the most likely to come back. But
I kind of see it the opposite way almost.
I
don't think Bryant's coming back. I think Baez might be the one to come back.
That's a possibility. Multiple of the guys have said that Jed was very straight with them, talked with them, was very frank and heartfelt in what he said, that he was doing what was best for the team, and they felt good about the conversations.
Yeah, I just here's my thought process and how I see this. If you would have asked me even a month ago, if you'd have asked me who's the Cub that's going to stay, I would have said Anthony Rizzo hands down. Now I'm kind of changing my thoughts on that. I think Baez would be the one to come back. And if you bring back Baez, you could say, all right, then maybe we move either him or Nico Horner to third. You can make that work. And I feel like Baez has the combination of wanting to come back and taking an acceptable price. Bryant, I think the price is going to be steep. And I'm not saying Bryant wants to come back, And maybe, I kind of tend to think that we might be overreading this, but he expressed his happiness of going to San Francisco when he got there, saying how he grew up a Giants fan and he would love to play here. And, San Francisco isn't a small market team. It's not a huge market team, but let's say San Francisco makes him a big offer. I would not be surprised if he'd want to stay there. And then with Anthony Rizzo, there might be a little strained relationship. Maybe I'm wrong, but just kind of based on what we've seen over the past year with the extension offers and that kind of fizzling out, maybe there's a little bit of a strained relationship, and maybe, just maybe, the Cubs see how this final month unfolded. They saw that Wilson Contreras was the one speaking out and kind of calling out some of what has been going wrong. And maybe they just see him as a more valuable leader than Anthony Rizzo. We, as the public, saw Anthony Rizzo as the captain. But if you remember, over the years, Theo Epstein, when someone would bring up Rizzo being the captain, he would kind of say, well, yeah, he's a good teammate, but he's still trying to build that leadership. So nothing against Rizzo, but maybe he wasn't that fearless leader we all thought he was in the locker room.
I'm going to agree. And the clashes between Wilson Contreras and Anthony Rizzo, I think were more than nothing.
Yeah, I don't think that those are just competitors.
Yeah, I don't think they hate each other, but I think that there is some contention there.
Yeah.
And regarding Chris Bryant is, I mean, he could very well want to stay in with the Giants. He could want to go to Philadelphia to play with his good friend, Bryce Harper. He could want to come back.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see either of those things.
He could go to the Yankees and continue playing with Anthony Rizzo. Who knows? But he's got an agent who is the guy who goes out and gets the most money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be no discounts given. My thing is, I don't know if the Giants open their pocketbooks as big as it might need to go.
Yeah, I don't know either. Well, like I said, they're not a small market team, but they're not a big market team either.
The big spenders, I mean, the Cubs may not spend this offseason but right now is the three guys that are making any money are Hayward, Hendricks, and Contreras. Bodie's making 2.5 and he's like the next highest paid guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and that's exactly. I mean, this is a scenario where Ricketts might be smiling in his office saying, well, I could go another offseason without paying guys because the simple excuse is we're rebuilding.
But they can't, because they can't say they're rebuilding because Jed Hoyer said they're not rebuilding.
Yeah.
So, but in theory, they could spend 100 and, I mean, after all said and done, their payroll is probably going to be in the $60 million range.
Yeah. I mean, you'll obviously bring in some free agents, but nothing huge.
Yeah, and I'm not saying at the end. I'm just saying is once they have arbitration and
right.
And then what the guys that are on your team are going to make, I'm going to say 65 million.
Yeah.
So you realistically have $100 to $120 million that you could spend and be in your window.
We're going to spend it on more pumpkins at Gallagher Way.
So you easily could fit a Chris Bryant in there.
Oh, you could easily bring back one of those guys on a long-term deal. Easily. It's just, will they do it?
Right. So I don't know. I'm just saying is they could.
Yeah, they could. And I would not be surprised if one of those guys comes back. And right now, the way I see it, as of right now, the guy that would shock me the least coming back would be Javi Baez.
They seem to like him the most.
And Baez, I think, feels like even though he turned down that extension a few years ago, I feel like negotiating with him would be a hell lot easier than Anthony Rizzo, who might be a little hurt, or Scott Boras.
Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, as it stands right now, if you're looking at the roster construction for next year, Wilson Contreras will be one of your catchers. You will probably go out and get a veteran catcher.
And you might see Miguel Amaya too.
You might. I don't know. It's a tough one because he probably needs to play every day. And how do you do that with Wilson Contreras?
It's kind of it might be kind of a Victor Caratini type situation.
But I don't know if that's good for Miguel Amaya.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, if you want my honest feeling, that it might not be what they're trying to make or project of him. But my honest feeling about Miguel Amaya is I think he's a second string catcher in the big leagues. I'm not sure he's an everyday guy, period. But they might not see it that way.
Or you move Wilson Contreras to first base.
Yeah, you could do that too.
And then Miguel Amaya is your catcher. And when he needs a day off, you put Wilson Contreras back behind the plate.
Well, yeah. And I mean, here's another big thing to consider. A big thing that we don't know the answer to quite yet. If that universal DH comes to the NL, then all of a sudden, you can make different things happen.
Absolutely. So, I mean, maybe Miguel Amaya is the number 2 catcher. Probably, I'm guessing they're going to go with a veteran.
You'll get a veteran no matter what. They might re-sign Jose Lobaton. He's been really good this year.
Yeah, so we're looking probably $1 million and a half there. Your infielders, I'm going to say Bodie, Madrigal, Horner, Patrick Wisdom, and Sergio Alcantara. Probably one more guy.
Yep.
Your relief pitchers, you're probably looking Kyle Ryan, Jonathan Holder, Rowan Wick, Cody Hoyer, Dylan Maples, Brad Wick, Jake Jewell.
No more Dylan Maples. We need to be done with that experiment.
It's
got all the stuff, just can't locate.
You're looking at your starting pitchers of Hendricks, Cole Stewart, Alec Mills, Adbert Azalea, Braylon Marquez.
Hey, don't rule out Justin Steele or Keegan Thompson. They're getting stretched out.
That's true. And your outfielders, Jason Hayward, Ian Happ, Gregory Dykman.
Mm-hmm.
And
the GOAT, Rafael Ortega.
And Brennan Davis and Ortega, probably your outfielders.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is not a big payroll.
That's looking like your team there.
That's a rebuild team. Though I will say that rebuild team already sounds better than the one we had in 2012.
Yes, because those substitute players that you have playing are guys that some of them are going to be your long-term guys.
Right. You have more prospects in there.
Yeah. It's just that they're on the early end of things.
I mean, in 2012, it was literally Castro, Rizzo, and guys off the street.
Yeah. I mean, you got legit catchers. Your infield is pretty close to what it's going to be. David Bodie is finally going to get a whole season of playing somewhere.
You would think.
I mean, he's probably not going to be I'm guessing Madrigal, Horner, Wisdom are your second, short, and third. And Bodie is the, whenever somebody has a day off, fills in any of those positions and the occasional, and fills in with injuries. And then I don't know, maybe one of the first basemen that they got fills in. Maybe Wilson Contreras plays first. Your starters, maybe you add a veteran free agent.
Probably.
Just to stabilize things.
I absolutely have to. You have to.
I'm not saying a top end starter. I'm saying, either a guy like at the end of his career, or, a mid-range guy, probably in the 10 to $12 million range.
Yeah, maybe you find someone with decent value that could give you something.
And then your
Bring
outfield,
Jose Quintana back.
your outfield is going to shape up to be very close to what your outfield is going to be when you're better, when you're a good team.
Mm-hmm.
Hayward is going to be a platoon guy, I think.
Only 2 years left. You might as well just play him as platoon or late defensive substitution. I mean, you're beyond the point where you care about the money and you're trying to get the production you signed him for. We're pretty much past that.
I mean, at what point does he become financially viable enough to dump that contract?
His last year.
You don't think you could dump him at the trade deadline next year?
I mean, if he's putting up numbers like this year, he'll have zero value.
If he puts up, if he can put something together, maybe you could eat most of the salary and dump him.
If he plays like he did in like 1920, then there's value. But because if you put together 1920, he had like an OPS over 800. Like he was actually doing pretty well. And this year he went back to being the Hayward we knew the first few years. So right now his value is zip. But next year, if he's hitting decently at the trade deadline, maybe you pawn him off and eat most of that salary to some team.
I think that's what needs to happen, because now he's just taking up space in your outfield.
I mean, he's worse than 2016. I didn't think you could get as much worse, but boy, it's bad this year.
Yeah, it's no bueno. Let's see. White Sox. They were in on Trevor's story. Honestly, they were in on Trevor's story.
Yeah, it just sounded like there just wasn't a match in offers.
And I don't get it. Colorado just felt that they could do better, but when the player desperately wanted the trade, I feel like you should have just made it happen.
Yeah, I mean, easier said than done, I guess. He's a pretty valuable asset, but I definitely get what you're saying, especially if he doesn't want to be there.
He doesn't want to be there, and he's a free agent at the end of the season. So
Right.
Now you're going to get the compensatory pick.
Right.
So I don't know. That seems like a tough one to me. But the White Sox, the thing is now the big asset obviously was they rebuilt that bullpen, which on paper going into the season was elite. And at times it was very good this season, but at times it was, and despite the blown save, Tepera adds value. If you get Bummer pitching well, if you get Tepera and Bummer pitching well, suddenly these games get real short, real quick.
I mean, just having Craig Kimbrell and Liam Hendricks, if you have the lead past the sixth inning, you're pretty much winning the game. I mean, this move to get Craig Kimbrell put their odds even better to win the World Series and even better to win the pennant, because you have back-to-back guys that it is really tough to score off of. I mean, Liam Hendricks is incredibly good. Craig Kimbrell is even better. And now that you have both of them, that is really important to have. And with Craig Kimbrell and Liam Hendricks, you can kind of mix and match, I guess. And it sounds like their egos are not going to let themselves get in the way. They're going to make it work however it's going to work best. So, I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. But the White Sox just increased their pennant chances even more with that move. And you know what? Good on them for making another, big move, because A lot of people are saying the Sox aren't going to do anything. They're going to settle with Cesar Hernandez, which isn't a bad move. But, people are like, oh, they're going to settle with that and Ryan Tepera. All of a sudden, you go out and get Craig Kimbrell. Give Rick Hahn a lot of props for that.
Yeah, I mean, Cesar Hernandez is not great, but he's better than whatever garbage you had.
Yeah, would you rather have him or Danny Mendick? I mean, that's a pretty easy answer.
Or Fleury Garcia.
Or Fleury Garcia. At least you're adding, because, with the injuries of Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, your power production hasn't been nearly what you thought it would be. Obviously, you still have power guys like Abreu and Yasmani Grandal, but Yasmani Grandal is also hurt now. So if you want to go out and you add a power bat, Cesar Hernandez is not a bad get. He already had 18 home runs coming to the White Sox. So
something like that.
He can hit for power. I mean, he's not an on-base guy. He's not an average guy. You were looking at Eduardo Escobar for a while, who is as a hitter isn't all that different from Cesar Hernandez. So at least you're bringing in a guy that you've wanted to bring in all along, and that's a power bat, and you got one. So and his fielding isn't bad either. So it's not a bad get at all. I think it's a pretty solid move for them.
Right. I mean, yeah, it fits the need. I think they still should have gone out and gotten the guy from Pittsburgh.
Adam Frazier.
Yes. But that's neither here nor there. I think that would have made them a much more dangerous team. You're getting your power bats back and Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, but I think that makes you a lot better.
There is a concern, though, not related to any of the trades, but Eloy Jimenez comes back. He has a big game-winning hit, and that hit was destroyed. I mean, the second it left the bat, you knew it was going to go to the moon, and it was great for him. It was great for the White Sox. It was great for Eloy Jimenez. And now he's got a hamstring injury, a groin, groin. Yeah. So now he's missed 3-4 games in a row already since coming back.
Yeah, but they're talking about him. What I just read this morning or this afternoon was they don't expect him to go on the DL,
which is good. Yeah. It's just, you don't like to see someone who's already dealt with injuries come back and get injured again. But, if it's not that serious and he's able to come back and it's more precautionary, I mean, you have an opportunity to be a bit more precautionary. You have the division wrapped up. No one else is catching you. Everyone else in your division either sold or stood pat. So no one's catching you. You've won the division already. So if you want to be a little more cautious, you can be a little more cautious. I understand that there is the home field advantage aspect of all this, but if you don't want to risk somebody getting hurt, then yeah, it might be smart to take an extra day or so to ensure that doesn't happen.
Right. Because basically they're gearing up and getting ready for the postseason.
Right. You want to be fully healthy. I mean, I still think this team is going to the World Series. So with all the talent they have and the pitching they have. So at the end of the day, you just want to ensure you have the best chances to do that by when that time comes.
Yeah. I mean, because the other divisions in the AL have actual races going on.
Right. Look at the AL East.
Yeah.
It's very intriguing.
So, you've got this wrapped up, and while in some ways it's bad because you don't, you lose that competitive edge in some ways.
Who cares? But
you get healthy, you get your bullpen where you want it. You get your starting rotation where you want it. Because Tampa and Boston are fighting it out in the AL East.
Mm-hmm.
The Yankees are only 6.5 games behind, and they just made some monster moves.
Yeah, and I mean, the Yankees have a great shot at a wild card regardless. So even if one of those teams wins and the other doesn't, the Yankees could be that second wild card team, or the Blue Jays could be that.
The Blue Jays are not out of this yet.
No, and they just got Jose Barrios too.
Yes. Why in the world was he traded?
Jose Barrios?
Yeah.
Why did they trade for him?
No. Why was he traded away?
Because the Twins are completely out of it.
Why would you trade him? Yep, you keep him.
Well, they're not going anywhere.
Well, not for this year. Unless they just don't feel like
they got a haul
anywhere.
though. They got a nice return though.
I mean, I don't know. I just feel like you keep building on him, but they got a haul, so we'll see how that goes. So,
and the Twins already have a pretty good farm system, so to build that up more is probably what they're trying to do. Even if they say they're not rebuilding, we all know that.
The White Sox by the end of the week are going to be in a double-digit lead.
Yeah. Zero worries about any other team in that division.
Yeah, and in the West, Houston's got that division right now, but Oakland's a good team, and Seattle's still fighting.
Mm-hmm. And they made some interesting moves because they were not out of it at all in the wild card race.
Yeah. So right as it stands right now, the two wild card teams would be Boston and Oakland.
And Tampa would be the division winner.
Tampa would be the division winners would be Houston, Tampa, and the White Sox. The wild cards would be Boston and Oakland. Mm-hmm. The Yankees are 2.5 out of the wild card. Toronto's 3.5 out of the wild card. Seattle's 3.5 out of the wild card.
That's a tight race.
Everybody else, they may not be that far out of the wild card, but they're dead, which would be Cleveland, Angels, Detroit, Kansas City, Minnesota, Texas, and Baltimore.
None of those teams have a chance. Honestly.
I mean, numbers wise, Cleveland and the Angels aren't that far out of it, but they're dead in the water. Seattle better make a big push soon, but I think the Yankees and Toronto have a legit chance to unseat Oakland. Sure,
absolutely. I mean, Oakland's good, but you look at the way the Yankees stacked up and that Toronto stacked up. They got Jose Barrios. They got a lot of thunder in their lineup. Those are all exciting races. But honestly, if I'm a White Sox fan, I'm probably thinking, I'm enjoying this. No pressure. I mean, the White Sox last year, they made the postseason, but they had that division lead through most of the season, and then they let it slip away. You don't want to see that happen again. And now you've pretty much guaranteed that's not going to happen. The last division title they won, 2008, you had to win that in game 163. And then the year before that, in 2005, they had that big lead and then saw it get down to the last day. So it's been a long time since the White Sox have absolutely run away with the division. So I think White Sox fans, they should just enjoy just coasting.
Looking at the NL, Arizona is 33.5 games out of first.
Yikes.
They've played 106 games. Yeah, that's bad. Whew.
Yeah, that's really bad.
The Cubs sitting beautifully 12.5 games out of first.
Yeah, standings don't mean anything anymore for them, but I mean the Brewers are going to win that. I mean, the only other team right now that looks to have a shot catching them is the Reds.
They're 7 games behind. I don't think they catch them.
I don't think so either.
What's the NL wild card look like? So the division leaders would be the Giants, Milwaukee, and the Mets. And I don't know if anybody's catching the Dodgers or the Padres for the wild card.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's the thing. If you're the Reds, you got to be thinking, of course, we're trying to catch a wild card where it's almost unreachable because the Reds have been playing some pretty good baseball. But when you got the Padres and the Dodgers competing for that wild card spot with the Giants leading the division, that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah, honestly, the NL might be wrapped up already.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think anybody's in that division is catching the Mets.
No. No one's catching the Mets. No one's catching the Brewers. The NL West, it's just a matter of who's seeded.
Yes, it's
gonna
those
be-
three teams are making it.
Right.
It's the seeding. I'm
Right.
gonna guess. I'm gonna guess how it is how it's going to end up. I'm gonna guess it's Giants win the division, Dodgers, Padres are the wild card, but it's Colorado's out, Arizona's out, Pittsburgh's out, Chicago's out, St. Louis is out, Cincinnati is they're
Life support.
They're on life support. Miami's out, Washington's out, Atlanta's on life support. Philadelphia has a puncher's chance, but I think
Nah.
I
don't think they're good enough.
Yeah, they'd have to turn it on real, and the Mets would have to get bad real quick.
Which we've seen the Mets do that before, but I think on paper the Mets are just too good. And for my prediction for the NL West, I'm going to do mine slightly different. I think the Dodgers are going to win the division.
That's a possibility.
I just think on paper they're by far the better team. And I think that some of the good things that happened in the Giants the first half might kind of fade away in the second half. The Dodgers are just better, in my opinion.
And here's my other reason why I think the Phillies don't have a chance to win the division, and they may do it, but why I don't think they will is to make up that 3.5 game gap is very doable with 60 games left, roughly.
Sure,
but they are sitting under 500. 105 games in, they're under 500. I think if you're a winning team, you could sell me on it, but when they're a losing team, they've got a 495 win percentage. That's a tough sell for me to make up 3.5 games on a team that got much better than the Phillies did.
The other thing too is the Phillies seem to be in on virtually everybody at the trade deadline, and they never really got anybody. Like they were talking about Chris Bryant, they were talking about Craig Kimbrell, they were talking about a bunch of other guys, but they never really got anybody.
My favorite move, though, the fucking power move, was there was a done deal, Max Scherzer to the Padres.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers swooped in and were like, nope.
Oh my God. And they got Trey Turner.
Yes. And that is what the Phillies should have done. They should have pulled a power move and snatched Javi Baez away from the Mets and gotten Chris Bryant. I think that would have put them over the top to win the division. Maybe they just didn't feel it was worth giving up what it would take to get those guys, knowing that the NL West is going to mow everybody down.
Right, and that they're both rentals.
Yeah, I think that's probably what they were like, you know what? Let's address this in free agency and with our minor league system and just keep building slowly.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to the White Sox really quick. I had two things I wanted to bring up really fast. Number one, did you see that Tony La Russa thing the other night where I think Jose Abreu got hit? Luckily, he's okay. It was scary. He was hit in the head.
And
Luckily,
Tony La Russa came running out like he was like he was Don Zimmer going to fight Pedro Martinez.
We can see what we want about Tony La Russa. It was clearly unintentional. The pitcher felt so bad about it, but you can't say that Tony La Russa is not behind his guys. I don't want to give him that much credit, but
if there's a guy that intentionally throws that was like a 90-mile-an-hour pitch that to his head. If you throw it that hard at somebody's head intentionally, you shouldn't be in baseball. And I can't imagine there's any manager that would condone that. It is clearly an accident.
Oh, it was absolutely an accident. It was 100% an accident.
Yeah.
You saw how bad he felt. I felt bad for that. I felt so bad for that pitcher. I mean, you could understand the raw emotions of Tony La Russa, but somebody probably just had to wrap his arms around him and be like, all right, we're all right. We're going to go back to the dugout, Tony. All right. We're going to have a nice glass of water. We're just going to calm down.
And we'll get you your butterscotch pudding snack. Change your diaper.
The other thing I wanted to bring up quickly about the White Sox, First of all, that crazy game Saturday night where, what was that guy's name? Zavala, that catcher, became the first person ever to hit 3 home runs when he hit his first career home run. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so Zavala hadn't had a career home run yet, and then he hits 3 in the same game he hit his first career home run. First time ever anyone has ever done that. Isn't that that's pretty cool, right?
That is really cool.
The other thing from that game is people were talking about Michael Kopech because he gave up 5 runs, and they were wondering if he was tipping his pitches or not. So I'm not saying this is a big deal or this is something we have to investigate in. I just found it kind of interesting because Kopech has been so dominant this year. Next thing you know, he's giving up 5 runs to the Cleveland Indians, and there was maybe some indication that he was tipping his pitches. I just wonder if that's something they're going to work on with him. It hasn't seemed to be an issue until now.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, yesterday's game, Dallas Keuchel had a bad game. Michael Kopech had a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan Tepera had a bad game.
Yeah.
I just think it was nobody's night. Maybe, I mean, it's hard to say that they were all tipping their pitches, but it was just nobody's night. And you almost won. You almost won.
Yeah, you almost won. Thanks to Zavala hitting 3 home runs.
Yeah. And, Engel had a home run. You had guys poured on. Zavala went 4 for 4.
Yeah, pretty. And then Ortega for the Cubs does something very similar the next day in a losing effort. In a 1-run game. It just wasn't quite as high scoring as the one on the south side the other night. But I mean, either way, yeah, the White Sox have had a little bit of a frustrating stretch. They split with the Twins. They lost 2 of 3 to the Brewers. They lost 3 of 4 in a very ugly series to the Kansas City Royals, but they beat the Indians 2 out of 3 at home. Close games, yes, but wins are wins.
If you're going to beat any of those teams, it's the Indians you want to beat because they're the ones that are the next closest to you.
Right.
So really, it doesn't matter as long as you're beating the correct teams.
And, you're going to, no matter how good you are, you're going to hit slumps. And to me, it just feels like a little bit of a funk they're in. And, when you get Luis Robert back, which is hopefully soon, and if Eloy Jimenez is healthy, then you'll pretty much be at full strength. You just need Yasmani Grandal in there. I just think there was going to be a time where not only were you going to slump, but there was just going to be that time where things just were kind of catching up to you, trying to ride with Brian Goodwin and Billy Hamilton. I mean, no disrespect to those guys because both Goodwin and Hamilton, for who they are, they've pretty much done their jobs fine. They've been okay for what they are.
They've done everything you can possibly expect from them.
Yeah, exactly. So, at least they have been contributing. So, all I'm trying to say is don't read too much into it. You're fine.
Yeah. I want to point out something real quick. Yesterday's game, I saw a little bit of the Brewers game, and Brandon Woodruff looked beatable, and he got the loss. But Brandon Woodruff, it's funny. He's on a team that's running away with their division. They're going to win the division. He's got a 2.33 ERA. You know what his record is? 7-6.
Hey, remember when Jacob deGrom won Cy Young and didn't even win 10 games or something like that?
Yeah, I know wins and losses don't mean a lot, but it's odd that a pitcher that is that integral to their team's success and has that good of an ERA on a team that with that many wins doesn't have a winning record. It's kind of odd.
Yeah, it is.
And I understand wins don't mean anything, but it's like if you're on a winning team that has one of the best offenses in baseball and you're hitting well and you have no RBIs. I know RBIs really don't mean anything, but it's you feel like you would just run into them on accident.
Yeah, exactly. That is kind of funny. Um, I just have one more little baseball bit I want to do before we move on, if that's
All right.
okay.
That's fine.
All right. Let me just pull something up here. I want this background music to play as we just remember the era that we had of Chicago Cubs baseball. You and I have talked about how it's time to move on, and I think a lot of fans get that. But despite the frustration of how we felt the past few years, not going on long runs like we thought we were going to do, or being quite the team we thought we were going to be, we still experienced the golden age of Cubs baseball, a World Series championship, 3 straight NLCS appearances, 3 straight years of winning at least one postseason round. We've never seen that in the history of Cubs baseball. We have never seen a run of this caliber of baseball. Nobody alive has. And even if you won 2 straight World Series and 3 straight pennants from 1906 to 1908, that was in a very different era. We're in an era of postseason play, multiple rounds, and they have done something that they've never done before. And just to Anthony Rizzo, my favorite all-time Cub, to Chris Bryant, whose 2016 MVP season was a joy to watch from start to finish, to El Mago Javier Baez, who dazzled us day in, day out with something new, whether it was a home run, whether it was a great tag at second base, whether it was a steal, whether it was freaking running backwards on a rundown and somehow making it to second. He gave us excitement every single day. And even to some of the guys who have moved on in the offseason, whether it was John Lester or Kyle Schwarber, I mean, just to all those guys that made this era so special, we will never forget it. And that's why I play I Will Remember You. Because the moment this era started, the moment it started coming together, whether you could consider that 2015 or 2014 when the prospects started making their way to the majors, the journey was something special. And I bonded with so many people over that era. And it was in my college years. When I started the college part of my life, the Cubs started the rebuild. A few months after I graduated, Mike Montgomery got that ground ball to Chris Bryant, to Anthony Rizzo, to end 108 years of suffering. It was such a journey, one that I will treasure always, and every Cubs fan will treasure always. I got to see my grandparents' faces when they, for the first time ever in their 80-plus years of life, got to celebrate a World Series. I am forever grateful for that era and for what we got to see. And even though we knew we were moving on from an era that just was meant to end, it was emotional saying goodbye for every joyous moment they brought. And the only thing I regret is maybe not cherishing that as much as I should have. And even though as much as I did cherish it, I could have cherished it more. After the World Series, even though we didn't get another one, we still made it to the NLCS in 2017. We still won 95 games in 2018 and saw so many crazy wins that year. And they got a division title last year, and they hosted more playoff games. Even if the end result wasn't what we wanted, there was so much good that happened. And I just hate to say goodbye, even though I know it's the right thing to do. I just wish it would have ended in better terms. I wish it would have lasted longer. I wish we would have gotten more championships. But you know what? We got something special, and I'll never forget it. The night the Cubs beat the Cardinals in the NLDS, my senior year of college, in my apartment, seeing that final out, remembering Pat Hughes's final call, going out and screaming down Harlem Avenue, hugging my friends, and then hugging my friends even more when we won it all in my family. Just thank you for that era. We'll never forget it.
Well said. Well said. I guess there's a couple quick bits of Bulls and Blackhawks and not too much else. We'll have to do a deep dive in Bulls soon, but
It's been a while.
Ryan Arcidiacono did not get his option picked up, so he's jettisoned. And they made a qualifying offer to Larry Markkinen, but I do not foresee him being a Bull next year.
I don't either. And to kind of go along with that, it sounds like the Lonzo Ball rumors are heating up.
They do, and it sounds like the Pelicans realize that they are not going to pick him up. So it's looking more and more like the Bulls will probably do a sign and trade.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Lonzo Ball will be a Bull next year.
I feel like the chances are pretty good too of Lonzo Ball being a Bull as well. And I'm all here for it. Bring him here.
I'm here. It may be an utter colossal flop, but I don't think so. I think he will complement this team well. And I think Zach LaVine's Olympic experience is going to take him to the next level for next season.
Yeah, I mean, just if you're going to try to keep building this team forward, bring guys that you know have the ability to contribute at the NBA level. We can't keep going with the experiments or trying to make something work based on potential. And I think AK realized that. I mean, that's why he said goodbye, Wendell Carter Jr., and hello, Vukovic, because Vukovic is an established all-star player. And you need to do more of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other bit of news is, I don't know if you saw the Blackhawks tweet out this morning. They tweeted out a little picture of a flower. Mm-hmm. So I think that is implying that Marc-Andre Fleury is going to play for the Blackhawks next season.
Well, he all but confirmed it in a video on social media.
I did not see that. I've been out and about all day.
Yeah, he took a quick selfie. He said, "Hey, Chicago, I'm ready. Let's do this," or something along those lines. So he's all but confirmed that he's going to be a Blackhawk next year. He is going to be their starting goaltender.
He's clearly a step up.
I mean, he just won the Vezina trophy.
Yeah, he's clearly a step up. I'm imagining Lankinen is his backup, his primary backup.
Probably.
Hopefully that leads to, growth from Lankinen.
Yeah, I mean, Lankinen was pretty much on his own last year. Now you get to learn behind one of this generation's great goaltenders.
Yeah. So, if you can put a competent defense in front of him, I didn't have a lot of problems scoring last year, just gave up a lot of goals. But so far, the one move, I mean, you're always going to have question marks with Stan. It's like, I think, I don't know what he does sometimes. Sometimes you're in the middle of applauding him, and then he just does something dumb. I don't understand why he let Pius Suter go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are a little surprised by that. I don't know if they're just, I don't know, because he impressed last year.
I thought so. And then you let him go to the Red Wings.
Yeah, that made me kind of sad.
So I'm a little shocked by that one. But I don't know if the Blackhawks will be good this coming year, but I think they'll be a lot more competitive.
I mean, they should be competitive. I'm not saying Stanley Cup winner or even a high seed by any means. I think they could be competing for a wild card spot, not necessarily even saying getting one, but competing for one. I mean, you have an actual goaltender now. You have a good defenseman in Seth Jones. and you brought in some more depth. You brought in Tyler Johnson. You made a few other moves. If Taze is back healthy, that's a big step up.
It's a big if too.
Yeah.
What does his conditioning look like? Is he fully healthy?
Yeah. You're right. You're right. We don't really know that yet. But either way, even if they're not in the best shape, they're in much better shape than they were last year.
Yeah. So I'm curious of what they're going to look like.
Yeah. I think you could at least look at this and say they're trying. I mean, they kind of preached rebuild, and then they tried to kind of just say they hit the F it button, but I think they hit the F it button because they were able to free up so much cap space. Brett Seabrook retired. Duncan Keith requested a trade. So that right there just opened up a ton of room for you to just try to go for it.
So Cap Friendly has these as the predicted lines for the Blackhawks next year. The first line, Kirby Dach, Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane.
It's pretty good.
The second line, Taves, Tyler Johnson, and Kubalik.
Not bad.
Third line, Henrik Borgstrom, Alex Nylander, and Dylan Strome. Fourth line, Adam Gaudette, Ryan Carpenter, Brandon Hagel.
That's right. Ryan Carpenter is still a thing.
The pairings, the defensive pairings. First pairing, Seth Jones, Calvin DeHaan. Second pairing, Jake McCabe, Connor Murphy. Third one, Riley Stillman and Ian Mitchell. The goaltenders, Marc-Andre Fleury, Kevin Lankinen.
Again, it's definitely better than last year. I don't see a Stanley Cup winner, but it's better than last year.
And they have Caleb Jones as the seventh defenseman. And the other two forwards is Brett Connolly and Ur Kyra. So I like the top two lines.
Yeah, the top two lines are pretty dang good on paper.
We'll see about the third and fourth lines, and the defense should be better.
Hopefully DeHaan is healthy.
Yeah. If DeHaan is healthy, that's a nice, him with Jones. And then hopefully we get the same Marc-Andre Fleury that was playing last year.
Yeah.
So then that wraps it up with Chicago Bears. Jake Butt retired. Not a huge deal. I think they signed him hoping that if he was healthy, you would get the guy that was drafted very high and added a lot to the roster. And it seemed like he was healthy. It seemed like he didn't have it in him anymore to play.
Yeah.
And that, I think when guys have a lot of injuries, that happens.
Sure.
It's, you look at some guys and it's training regularly to stay in shape and be ready for the season is one thing, but recovering from an injury, then getting ready to play seems like it really takes its toll. And
especially in a sport like that.
Yeah. And it just seems like he just didn't have it in him to keep going. But honestly, they signed Jesse James, who I'm surprised they were able to pick up. He's not a great player, but he's a very serviceable player. And to pick up as a depth tight end and that late in the game, I think that's pretty, it's a pretty good pickup.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was smart to bring in another guy like that.
And we've already seen him making some plays. He's connected several times on offense during training camp, from what I read, because it didn't win the lottery, so I couldn't go.
Yeah, and footage is forbidden.
Forbidden footage. I forgot which beat writer was like, since this was not in the time that we were allowed to take pictures, here's me drawing a picture of Allen Robinson making a nice diving catch.
Yeah, he makes like every camp he has like a stick figure drawing.
Yes, it was hilarious. But from what I'm reading about camp, it seems like Andy Dalton is actually having a nice command of this offense.
Yeah, I've read that too. And, as you're reading stuff about the quarterbacks, I think we got to remember to just take a chill pill when you hear that Justin Fields struggled with a few things, because you know what? When you're a rookie just drafted coming into the NFL, you're going to have growing pains no matter who you are. So,
yeah, find me a
Don't
quarterback that
much.
didn't have struggles and actually played. Peyton Manning threw like 30 interceptions his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
There's struggles. Tom Brady didn't, but he didn't play right away. He
That was
sat
good
for a
old
long
Drew
time.
Bledsoe.
Yeah, I mean Drew Bledsoe. You may not remember. He was in my heyday. Drew Bledsoe was a really good quarterback.
Yes, he was.
So you sat behind a really good quarterback. So you've never seen Pat Mahomes really struggle either, but he was a guy that sat, he didn't play right away. And, my big fear was not that Justin Fields was going to sit, is that he was either going to sit when he should have been playing because he's better than Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton was just in there to take some of the abuse. That was one of my fears. Or they were going to rush him out there and he wasn't quite ready, and that was going to stunt his growth. But I'm actually happy, as I want Andy Dalton to legitimately win this competition. They've already said he's going to start, but I want him to win this competition. And I can tell you, it's been a long time since I saw any Bears quarterback have a command of this offense in training camp this early.
Yeah. I mean, you look at all the guys we've had before in terms of veterans. We've had, you had Mitch Trubisky, who was technically experienced last year, and Nick Foles. The year before that, you had Mitch Trubisky and Chase Daniel. And then before that, you had Mike Glennon, Mitch Trubisky, and Mark Sanchez, who never played. And then you had the likes of Jay Cutler and Matt Barkley and, all those guys. But, now you bring in Andy Dalton, who has had a long career of success. And even if he's not good anymore, at least you can rely on him to, have the right knowledge to be good. And, just his presence can help. And you know what? If he does end up playing better than expected, great.
And the guy I was thinking of drawing the pictures is Patrick Finley.
Yeah, that was Patrick Finley. Thank you. I was trying to think of who it was as well.
I know. And I was like, who was it? It wasn't Kevin Fishbane. I'm like, who is it? And, okay.
It wasn't Brad Biggs.
No, definitely not Brad Biggs. But it's but you've seen Andy Dalton look, he's not looking like a world beater, but he seems to have an understanding of this offense, and he's made some nice plays. And you're like, okay, if you can be a competent offense with Andy Dalton at your helm, and you legitimately aren't forced to play your rookie quarterback, Justin Fields, then I think that's a big win for the Bears. Is you don't want to be put in a position where Pace and Nagy are like, oh shit, we're getting trounced. We need to put Justin Fields in or we're going to get fired. You don't want that.
Right. You want Justin Fields to grow into his position, whereas Mitch Trubisky, who, obviously it's hard to compare Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields because of their talent potential. But I'm just saying, Mitch Trubisky had to come in because of necessity, because Mike Glennon was so terrible. Whereas in this case, if Andy Dalton is good enough to help this offense move and help you win for the first year, or at least even the first half of the year, then that allows you to grow Justin Fields, and that makes things all the much easier.
Right. And from what Brad Biggs is reporting that he expects Jesse James, the tight end they just signed, to be the number 3 tight end.
And that makes sense. You're playing behind Kmet and Graham.
Right. But to be able to pick up a guy that late in the, right a couple days before training camp starts.
That's a good find.
Yeah. That's to be your number 3 tight end. I think that's a huge pickup.
All of a sudden your tight end core, I mean, it was pretty good last year, your top 2, but now you can have a really nice tight end core. If Jimmy Graham does what he does last year, Cole Kmet takes that next step, and Jesse James is a reliable 3rd string, you're looking at a pretty dang solid tight end core going forward.
I think you're going to need it. I think it's smart to build your offense around tight ends because I think your wide receiver depth gets pretty thin.
Well, right. I mean, we mentioned we don't have Anthony Miller anymore, which, could benefit both him and us, but you got Allen Robinson, you have Darnell Mooney, and then next you're going to be looking at guys like Riley Ridley, Daz Hands, as I call him.
Daz Hands.
Daz
I mean,
Hands.
if he's healthy.
If he's healthy, yes. So, you're
yes.
right. It is a little thin after Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney.
I mean, you picked up a couple speedsters, but it's, I don't know what it's going to look like. And, you're probably going to lose Allen Robinson next year. This is probably his last year as a Bear. So it's a little tough. So you probably want to build around, a good tight end. The defense has looked very good, and you're actually getting pressure from both sides of the defensive line. Robert Quinn is actually looking good, apparently. So the defense apparently has some new swagger. So Desai has, energized some new life into them, which is good to hear.
Yeah, I think Sean Desai might end up being a better fit for these guys than Chuck Pagano was.
As much as I'm not excited about Chuck Pagano, but I was like, oh, hey, that's a nice pickup after you lose a legend. And I think it was just the game had sort of passed him by.
Yeah, I'm agree, because I was pretty optimistic with Chuck Pagano, not going to lie, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, if we get back to a more Vic Fangio type style defense, then, maybe we can see better results again. And, another thing to point out is I know talk is talk, but if you listen to Khalil Mack's interviews during camp, he sounds like a guy who's trying to make the most while he still has it. He pointed out, he's like, I'm not the kid I used to be. I'm in my late 20s now. And, who knows how much longer I'm going to have my prime. So he's kind of eager to go out there and really make shit happen again. And the thing is, Khalil Mack was good last year and good the year before. He just wasn't that 2018 level where he was beyond ridiculous. So, maybe he finds a little bit of that spark again that he had in 2018.
Statistically, he was great last year. I think statistically, he was one of the top 5 defensive players in football. It's just the sack numbers weren't there.
Right.
And actually,
that's the whole thing.
When you looked, Robert Quinn, although he eyeball test didn't look that good, if you look quarterback pressures, he was pretty good. Now I just need him to get home and get the actual sacks.
Right, because I mean, don't get me wrong, pressures are important, but Ryan Pace paid him all that money to get to the quarterback.
Absolutely. And there was the same criticism we had about Leonard Floyd. His pressure numbers were good. He wasn't getting home. And he goes to the Rams and he's getting home a lot more. He's getting to the
Mhm.
quarterback a lot more. Still, I don't think worth the contract, but Robert Quinn, if Sean Desai can, flip that switch and get him to the quarterback and Khalil Mack to the quarterback, that's going to make that secondary look real good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're getting the pressures on the quarterback, and you turn Eddie Jackson loose to make plays happen, that's how you're going to be a top 10 defense.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, we're still a ways off, and then, as far as fans go, we're not seeing really anything because it's just what the beat writers are writing. We might see a video of a couple plays here and there, but it's going to be our first opportunity is preseason.
Well, I'm going to be at Bears Family Fest this Tuesday.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'll get to see a little bit of action. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, so we are about 2 weeks away from the first preseason game.
Isn't that against the Bills?
Dolphins.
Dolphins.
Second one's against the Bills.
Oh,
the Bills, who rumor has it is flirting with Austin, Texas, up to move.
Yeah, that's there are gonna be a lot of unhappy people in Buffalo if that happens.
Well, I mean, how many jobs are going to be lost in the folding table industry?
Yeah, right. Can't slam anymore.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I've said my piece. I think now that I talked about it on a personal podcast, just on my YouTube channel, Alex Pat, if you want to check that out. And then we talked about it here, and I've talked about it with pretty much everybody, every family and friend member in some capacity about the tearing down of the Cubs. I think I'm just at that point now where I'm fully ready to move forward with a new era.
I mean, we don't have any other options.
No,
so.
we don't. We don't. And you know what? Congrats to Bryant, Rizzo, and Baez for all homering in their debuts with their new team.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I hope all three of them tear it up.
Yes. But that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Follow Alex at Facebook, Alex Pat Sports Chat, or AlexPatSportsChat.blogspot.com. And thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Denver New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.